Hello, it is Alexa, and you are listening to the Wishbeads podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I met our guest, Megan Tady, at a book signing event that happened in Los Angeles about 6 weeks ago. She's an author with Zibby Books, which is a phenomenal imprint, which has also just opened up a local bookstore here in Santa Monica. And I love Zibby Owens when I met her, I don't even know, maybe 6 or 8 months ago. She's an innovative entrepreneur who merged her love of reading and authors with actually a publishing house. And Megan is one of her featured authors. Her book, Super Bloom, came out 3 months ago, and I just finished reading it. It is absolutely fabulous work of fiction, a fun romp, great characters, tons of humor, and also quite meaningful. And I was so impressed with Megan when I heard her talk about her journey, becoming a published novelist and understanding how hard it was to say yes to her deep wish and to stay persistent to making it come true. And I have met so many people who have shared with me, who wished out loud and said that their wish was to become a published author. And so I thought, here's where we have a great opportunity to learn from someone who made a wish, shared her wish, and made it come true. And I'm sharing other stories so that you can stay inspired to say yes, just to wishing, to say yes, to staying active towards those wishes, to saying yes, to taking a leap of faith, to look at your fears and say, you know what, I'm going to feel that fear, recognize it, and do what I want anyway. Because that's how you make your wishes come true. So I hope you will enjoy my wonderful conversation with Megan Tady about her journey to becoming a published novelist. Enjoy. Well, Megan, we are going to dive in. I am so excited to actually have you on the podcast because from the moment we met and I was hearing your story, I just knew that my audience would resonate with it and actually learn quite a bit from your journey. Because I have heard many people have a wish of really writing a book, of whether it's fiction or nonfiction or being a published author or self-publishing. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so great to meet you. I think it's been 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago or something like that at a book event in LA. And I'm so thrilled that you invited me on.
Well, here we are. I was just telling you before we began that I have just finished Super Bloom, and it is a fabulous read. It is hilarious, but also very inspiring. Our heroine does discover who she is. She overcomes obstacles and inner turmoil and grief and kind of goes on this wild adventure of fulfillment, which I feel like, my gosh, if there's any theme for, well, I was going to say 2023, but we could call it 2020 through 2023.
That's true.
It really captures that. But can you take us back? I want to go way, way back.
Yeah.
You and your identifying yourself as a writer. Was this something that you really resonated with as a child? Is this something you love to do?
Yeah, I have been steeped in writing and words since I was young, and my whole professional life, and also as a kid. I was reading constantly, and I was holed up, just like my character Joan, in my room writing stories. And my grandmother gifted me a typewriter when I was 8 years old, and I was pecking away at the keys and writing these, crazy stories. I had a wild imagination, and I just loved writing and I loved reading. I really didn't stop to say, oh, this is a career. Oh, I could write these books. I just loved the act of writing. And I got to high school and I started on the newspaper staff, and I instantly fell in love with writing the untold stories, interviewing people, finding out the truth, writing on a fast-paced deadline, editing. Went to college and got a journalism degree and came out of there wanting to be an investigative reporter who broke the really tough stories. And I came out of college right at a time when newspapers were consolidating and they hadn't figured out how to like monetize an online model. So a lot of newspapers were either consolidating or they were shutting down altogether. So finding a job in media was really tough at that time. And I found myself really struggling. And I just started freelance writing and sort of, writing for anyone who would take me. And I remember my journalism professor, right before I graduated, called me into his office, and he opened up a drawer, and it was just stuffed full of paper rejection letters. And he was like, I'm just trying to prepare you for the real world.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to face. And I was sort of like, oh, so that's not going to be me. And of course it was. I mean, I have faced a ton of rejection. I have pitched hundreds of stories, and I've gotten quite a few picked up. But I had to get a really tough skin along the way.
Yep.
And I always still felt outside of fiction. I just didn't think that belonged to me, that I was a writer in that way, that I had it in me. It felt like someone else could do that, but not me. And I kind of began to take some slow steps toward it, taking some fiction writing classes. But like my character, Joan, I just had a lot of self-doubt about whether that was for me. And we can kind of, go into what that journey looked like, but it took a long time to build up the confidence to say out loud, I want to write a novel. It felt so absurd. It feels like so many people are writing a novel, or like saying they're writing a novel, but not really writing a novel. And I was scared to do it.
Yeah. Okay. There's so many things I want to touch on here, but going back, when we're talking about wishing or finding that thing, discovering the thing that really lights you up, I often suggest that people go back to their childhood and think about those activities that they love to do when nobody was watching, when it wasn't for an assignment or somebody told you to do it, the things that you fell into that you just chose to spend your time. So I love that really was part of your story. But then there's also this other bit where we also have those allies in our lives that are like your grandmother gifting you that typewriter, her recognizing that you loved this thing, that you spent time in it. And how could she support you in that endeavor? Like those like power objects. Do you still have that typewriter?
I don't. And I don't know where it is. I don't know when my family, like when did it cycle out of our family?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good exercise in non-attachment. That's true.
It is. Yeah. But I mean, how amazing as a kid to receive a gift that is sort of an adult gift, it's like for some, and it's sort of valuing and respecting a child and their gift and also their potential of what they could sort of step up to. I didn't know how to type, I didn't know how to use it. But sort of seeing that in me, I mean, that felt really amazing. And I did feel like I was growing up in a family that saw and appreciated that I had a way with words and storytelling, and just valued it. And that's amazing.
Yeah, it's so, and to know that those individuals, like you were getting messages from different people at different times in our lives. So whether it was your grandmother, your family giving you that time, the equipment, the way to sort of say like, keep going. And to your college professor saying, look, I'm going to take you into the inner sanctum of like what it really means, not to scare you, but to prepare you, and to really understand what this world is that you're entering, which truthfully, you need it to understand that it's not going to be like you're going to give up after your first 3 or 10 or 30 rejection letters, that it takes that kind of resiliency. And I certainly remember that same advice when I was entering the world of professional acting. Like, your business as an actor is to constantly be auditioning. That's your job.
Yeah.
The bonus is when you actually book some of those auditions, but the real job is just to go in there and do your thing and do your thing and do your thing. Same with writing, right? And write and write and write and write.
I think what I was up against in the beginning of my journalism career, and then in the beginning of my fiction career, is writing came really easy to me. And at first I was sort of handed a lot of things because it was easy, positions on the newspaper staff, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But when it came to the real world, I sort of thought that would happen too. Like here I go emailing, the editor of the New York Times, and
I'm here ready to
I'm ready. Yeah. Here I am querying agents after working on my manuscript and, hearing crickets and being like, oh, and in both cases, having it be really a humbling experience and realizing that I had a lot to learn, a ton to learn along the way.
So let's get into that, because I think that, well, number one, I do want to talk about this idea of sharing your wish out loud. This idea that like writing a novel is for other people, not me. Where did that come from? Right? Because I think we do that all the time to ourselves. Oh, they can have that, but I can't. Right. Maybe even building a fictitious story around why that came easily to them, which is usually completely not true, But why do we do that thing? Like, let's talk about that before we move on.
Right. I know. I think I had read a ton of literary fiction growing up and in college, and beautiful novels. And then like this sort of like, literary with a capital L, and thought that that's what, if I were to ever write fiction, I had to aspire to. And that felt very intimidating. It didn't feel like that was my voice, or even that I wanted to write that way, but it felt like in order to be taken seriously, that's how I needed to write. So there was that element kind of in place as I was, thinking about fiction. And then there's this idea of sort of this self-doubt. Other people, I see this for other people. I don't see it for myself. And as I began to talk about it a little more, explore it a little bit more, I began to say it out loud to friends, my family, my husband, and say, I'm working on a novel. And at first it was quite quiet. And this novel required some research of interviewing massage therapists. And I remember very clearly approaching the first massage therapist, a friend in town, which made me have to say, so I'm working on a novel. Can I interview you? It's in early stages, but I want to know what it's like to be a massage therapist. I need to know, what it's really like. And I began to you kind of beam it out, little bits at a time. And as it began to snowball, this book took me 8 years from thinking about it to getting it out in the world. And I remember about, halfway through, when I was trying to get an agent, writing an email to myself from a pretend agent saying, dear Megan, we love your novel. We would love to represent you. Just beginning to really, at first, these small little beams, until I was really beaming it out and made it a point to talk about it, with friends for dinner, that I'm working on this project and I want to be a novelist. And that was a huge shift from I don't know.
I mean, Megan, this is so crazy. It is exactly where we are as a company, where we are proselytizing about wishing out loud.
Yeah.
Because this notion of keeping your deepest desires to yourself is literally blocking the assistance that will come to you by just saying it. Yeah. Nobody can read your mind that you wanted to write a novel. You need to put a little bit of and I love that you use the word beam,
Yeah.
Because, this idea that your wish, your light is inside of you, it's shining this future image, this movie of the life that you see for yourself as a published author, as a novelist.
Yep.
And you beaming that story, that light, that image to other people and giving it voice is the very thing that you start to then attract and get just what you need, whether it's an interview, whether it's an introduction to an author, an agent, whether it is an editor recommendation, whether it's feedback from somebody. There's all the millions of steps and years. Friends, please note, Megan said 8 years of work and consistency to then make your wish so that I'm holding your book in my hands.
Right.
Powerful.
Yes.
So powerful.
Yes. And it's tricky because when you talk about your dream out loud, then people check in on it, right?
Yeah.
So years go by and I'm meeting with the same friends who are saying, hey, how's your novel? And I have to be prepared to be like, still working on it. And that is sometimes a welcome thing to talk about. Sometimes I had moments where it felt embarrassing. I was like, I'm failing. And I really went through a period where I was like, I'm working the hardest I've ever worked at anything in my life. And it's possible it won't happen. What will that say about me? Like, what will I do if it doesn't happen? And it was such a scary thing. And for years it wasn't happening. And does that mean I'm a bad writer? Does that mean I'm terrible at this? Do I give up? Like, what do I do with that possibility?
And how did you navigate those times?
I started to really seek out stories of failure and resiliency and other authors who had many novels in a drawer. And I think we as a society are like hit over the head with the overnight success story and the people who are swooped up, for the stage, for movies, for their books. And we sort of think, if that's not me, that doesn't happen to me, it must mean I'm talentless. And
I am a worthless person.
It's just like, I should stop doing this. And so I had to, first of all, start to look at other writers who had reached a level of success that I really admired, who could say, oh my gosh, this novel took me 15 years, or this, I have 3 novels in a drawer. It was only my 8th novel that got success, quote unquote. I also had to really deeply connect to why I was writing, and that I actually love the act of writing itself was bringing me so much joy. And my best days, when I'm the best version of a mom, a partner, person in the bank, line at the bank, I've touched the page in some way, whether it's been read or not. And that's something I'm having to remind myself in this moment as I'm sort of 3 months into my book being published, with still ups and downs. It's being met with acclaim here and not acclaim there. And how do I stay really connected to what kept me rooted before, to connect to the writing itself, which I feel like is really important.
Yeah. And how would you, so here you are, you held the torch for 8 years, you made it happen. And we're going to find out how you, quote, made it happen. But I also want to just take a moment to talk about what would it have felt like to actually do nothing or to give up, year 5, year 7.
Yeah.
What was that? What was the other for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel really grateful to earlier iterations of myself. I can picture myself at specific moments where I got, rejection from an agent, where I was this close and I'm just, I'm crying in my kitchen. And moments where getting feedback, and it's just, oh God, can I do that piece of feedback? Is that what I do next? And I'm so grateful to that me then, that sort of like had that day, cried, did what I needed to do, and then came back to it. What would it have looked like if I hadn't? I don't know. I think I feared that option because I loved the writing so much, and I really wanted to see if I could achieve this monumental goal. Sort of thinking that you can publish a novel like straight out of the gate is like thinking you can go be the goalie for the Women's World Cup team without working your ass off for years. And I had to just get really humble. I had to realize I had so much to learn. I still have so much to learn. I had to study fiction in a completely different way. I had to sort of take many steps back and kind of reapproach it. And I did take breaks. It wasn't like this whole 8 years. My kids are young. They're 4 and 7. So I was having my kids, I was raising them. I was running my business as a writer and editor. And I just had to take like some sanity breaks and also like breaks to raise my kids and maternity leave and all that stuff. So I don't know if that's a clear answer, because I think I was scared of that other version.
You were scared of plan B, which was give up.
I was. Yeah, I didn't want to.
Yeah. And were there moments of ahas along the way where you kind of like stoked your own flame a little bit to stay committed to it? Can you think of like a specific example of when you came back to it and said, now is the time I'm going to come back?
I think around 2019, I had been kind of petering in and out of the book. And I think around that time I was like, okay, I'm going to really get serious again about this book. And I can't remember if we talked about this in LA, but I think as women and moms, we use this language, sneaking out or sneak in, like,
oh yeah,
like, you get a text message from a girlfriend, can you sneak away tonight? Or, I was kind of using language like, I'm going to sneak in some writing, which makes it feel kind of criminal. It makes it feel like
you're doing something naughty.
Yeah, I have to do it behind my family's back. I have to do it in the, cloak of night, I was sort of like, I'm going to really devote all I have to this. And I'm going to change the way I talk about it. So again, talking about it differently with my family. My husband's been so supportive all along, but just like putting this front and center for my family to value. It's a strange thing to value, right? It's you're valuing your partner being in their imagination. And writing isn't just at your keyboard, it's thinking time. It's time that looks like you're not doing anything. You're not accomplishing anything, right? But like so much of the writing has to take place as you're thinking about it or taking walks. And I just began to really place that time front and center, and my family followed. I'm so grateful, and began to sort of rally around that for me. And I started taking classes. So talking about how did I do it? I took some more classes. I joined a writing group, which was so central to get feedback on my book and also learn how to give feedback on other people's books. I, again, was listening to so many podcasts from authors, how to query your novel, how to write a really great query letter. I just was sort of steeped in this world and doubling down, really doubling down.
Isn't that, I just feel, I want to highlight again the importance of what you just shared in terms of the intentionality of your language.
Yeah.
And also being intentional about your time.
Yes.
And I feel like whether you can look at your life and say what feels a little bit out of balance. For some people, they prioritize so much on their work that they don't find the balance with free time or family time or friendships or whatever. But being intentional is so important, because we can whittle away our time, even goofing around on our phones.
Yeah.
Versus saying, you know, what is a priority to me? And the way that I make it a priority is stating it and then taking action. So whether that is like alert family, like it's on my calendar, and you're absolutely right that this idea of like, you're a writer because you did so many pages a day. It's a creative process, and creativity demands us to be playful and quiet and reflective and all of those other things. So thank you for that reminder of that. Really, really, really important. And I also love the idea that, you know, the humility and the awareness that by learning, you are going to basically be an improved writer. And I remember from the talk that you gave when we were in person was that you actually had to, I believe, switch writing groups to find one that really resonated with you. So this is a lot of perseverance on your part, and accountability, and massaging your own process until everything kind of like fell into place.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, for any listeners out there who are, you know, trying to get an agent, my agent initially rejected my manuscript. She had requested the full manuscript. She wrote back and said, I love it, but I have a couple issues with it. I feel like it has a stakes issue, meaning your stakes aren't high enough for your character. And I'm very reluctantly passing. And of course, I cried.
But it's a very nice rejection letter.
It was the most beautiful rejection. And I, you know, then the next day took it to my writing group and was like, all right, ladies, you know, we have a stakes issue. And I worked on it for 10 more months, tweaking it and figuring it out. And I went back to her the following fall and said, hi, would you look at this again? And it's rare that they do. And she said yes. And now she's my agent. So, you know, you just never know. And what I just kept hearing is that the people who are getting published are the people that don't give up. They just keep going.
You can also say the people who make their wishes come true.
Yes.
They just don't give up, and your wish can change. Like, for example, because we're focusing on books, I've heard a lot from my friends who are writers, this debate about being a self-publishing versus finding and, you know, having an agent and going through a traditional publisher. I know that people want to hear this. Would you mind sharing your perspective on that, your own journey?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I am with a new imprint called Zibby Books, and they publish one book a month. And it's started by a woman named Zibby Owens, who runs a podcast called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And I was watching the imprint sort of begin and was very impressed and loved their sort of author first focus. And I ended up submitting to them unagented at the time. And my agent now was considering my manuscript, and they offered to acquire my book. And then my agent, you know, was like, I'm here.
Remember me?
Remember me. So along the way, you know, I was sort of like, as I was facing rejection, I was sort of like, do I self-publish? And I know of a ton of authors who are having immense success self-publishing. And it is no longer the sort of like maligned avenue that it kind of used to be, where it was like, oh, you're self-publishing because you're not as good, or you don't have the approval of publishing capital P. What I'm finding is that a lot of authors have a ton of autonomy. They make more income. They can run their own show by self-publishing, and it's going great. I think for me, there's a big learning curve to doing it right. And
in terms of marketing, exposure, and all of that. Yeah.
Yes. And the authors who have taken the time to learn it and then sort of own it are just, you know, excelling and are sort of like, see ya, big five, like we don't need you. And I really admire that. I felt like for me, I didn't have the bandwidth to learn it. It felt like running my business and writing this book and all the other things in life. I felt like I just can't learn it. So I really wanted to get a sort of publisher who would do that stuff for me. And of course, there's like the big publishing houses, and then there's smaller indie publishing houses, and Zibby Books kind of falls in the middle of those. So I was trying for the top, and I also knew that I would most likely be a mid-list author. And sometimes you get lost on those lists with big authors above you and big houses. And I'm so grateful I landed with Zibby, because each book that month, you're sort of the lead title, and all the resources, all the attention is poured on you.
Yeah. And she's just, I had the pleasure of hearing her speak and reading for her own book launch. And I read her book, which I enjoyed very much, called Bookends. But what I like about her is she's bringing the spirit of entrepreneurship to the publishing world. I think it's one of the most exciting developments in publishing, specifically how they deal with authors. And we met at a wonderful in-person gathering that my dear friend and wish warrior, Leslie Turner, put together. And it's such a refreshing way for connection and community and conversation around books, which is Zibby's passion. So it's neat. I'm thrilled for you. I actually think it's a really interesting imprint and a great business model.
Me too. And, they're so innovative. They're so willing to try new things, whether it's a QR code on the back of the books, you can portal into like more information. They're just, really willing to like, okay, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's back up. Let's try this. And I love that. The whole team, it's not just Zibby. She's surrounded by a really talented group of professionals and editors and people who know the book world. And I've been so impressed.
Oh, that's great. I'm so thrilled for you. So here you are, 8 years in the making, persistent, juggling all the things as one does with a busy and full life. You've published your book. And then what is sort of your next wish? Like, what's your vision for how this is unfolding for you?
That's a great question. Well, I sold my second novel to Zibby Books, and that felt amazing. My goal was to sort of like, okay, let's see if we can keep going here. So I just submitted it to my editor. We're meeting next week to hear her sort of big feedback,
great,
which is exciting and of course daunting. You just never know. And to just keep going on this train. And I love the writing, and I have so many ideas. My brain is just like always going, and to keep landing on stories that feel really compelling, to challenge myself with each book. This next book is a dual POV, mom and daughter, alternating chapters of POV. So that's new for me, really pushing myself with each one. And it's been really important to me as I grow this career to be an author who gives back to other authors. I feel like I had a lot of generous literary sort of friends come out, whether it's someone who blurbs your book or you have a question and you DM them on Instagram and they are so kind to write back. All those sort of things. Like I want, help on a query letter. How is this reading? So it's been important to me to do that as much as I can as I hopefully keep this career growing.
Oh, it's so awesome. And then just lastly, what are some of the maybe 2 or 3 gifts that you've learned by the virtue of actually pursuing and taking action, consistent action towards your wish of being a published novelist? What are the gifts that you have learned about yourself along the way? Because we so often are so fixated on achieving that thing that we don't really acknowledge the gifts of the journey that you took to get there. That's really the greatest reward.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, I think I've learned that I'm like a determined little energizer bunny. It was like, the more I heard no, the more I was like, I'm gonna keep this going. I'm gonna learn how to do it and make it happen. So I definitely learned that about myself, and I learned that, there's going to be dark days in this career. Publishing is hard. It is hard to sell books. It's hard to move books. There are days someone's going to tag you in a 1-star review and it's going to plummet your mood. And, it's not just about getting your book published. Once you get across it, there's still all these challenges. So learning that I'm okay, even when I'm getting rejection on the side of, getting it published, or on the other side, like, I am okay. The other major gift is that my kids have watched me work hard for something and achieve it. They have seen me grind it out. They have seen me in tears in the kitchen. And they have seen and held the physical manifestation of this weird thing mom's doing. Mom's going to write. Like, what is this? And where's this book? It's been years, Mom. They've seen it. They've held it. I was just at a restaurant last weekend, and my 7-year-old daughter was like, Mom, are you going to tell them who you are? And I'm like, I don't think I'm a known entity right now, but it's just so cute. And they're so proud. And my daughter's writing her own little stories now and putting them in our little library. And, so I feel really proud that they saw that happen and kind of come to fruition.
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. And I also want to highlight again for people who are, kind of intimidated and, maybe have that fear of failure, which is very human nature. We all have that. I also want to highlight the fact that you leaned into it and actually used the stories of others to inspire you to keep going. Yes. And I just think that's so beautiful. And I think, Megan, there's no wonder why I was so drawn to capturing your story again and reconnecting with you, because I so applaud how you have shown up to make your wish come true. And now even going a little bit deeper and finding all the nuances of how you do it, in particular, wishing out loud. It's just the best. It's just incredible. And for anybody, I strongly recommend getting Megan's book, Super Bloom. It is a fabulous read. Between you and me and whoever is listening, I think it would make an incredible series or film. I just am saying, super good. I actually see it as a series. And I wish you just all the best in the world. And can you tell people, where we can get your book?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Alexa. This has been such a delight. You can get my book wherever books are sold, especially independent bookstores. And I'm on Instagram at Meg Tady. My website's megantady.com. And if you are out there as an emerging writer and you need or want to connect, feel free to, connect with me. I'd be happy to help.
Awesome. And maybe at some point we'll actually host a wish circle for writers, for people that have a big dream and wish of writing a book, and they can ask you questions there after we do the visualization.
Let's do that. That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your second book. I am sure it's going to be a wild success. And I just keep going after your wishes. It's just absolutely a joy, because we get to be the beneficiary of that. We get to be delighted by your stories and your joy and your humor and all of it. So thank you for making your wish come true.
Thank you, Alexa.
Of course, I hope you do pick up Megan's book. And if you are ready to wish out loud, and I hope you are, I hope you will pick up some Wishbeads at wishbeads.com, find a style that sparks your heart. And listen, it is going to take 1 million yeses to say yes to joining us. And I hope you say yes to yourself, to your wishes, to wrapping the world in wishes on September 23rd, 2023. And if you are watching this after, then I'm sure you will stay tuned into all the fun events that we have going on, all the ways that we're inspiring you to wish, and start making your wishes come true. Okay, until next time.